This adaptation had become obscure over the years, and I'm glad awareness has picked up. Welcome to my channel, KC. That's me, Carrie Chuck, the Sledge Storyteller, talking about what is widely considered to be the most faithful film adaptation of the never gone out of print Bram Stoker novel, Dracula. And why do I agree with the aforementioned statement? Well, let's go over the plot. Now, like my previous Dracula videos, I'm using imagery from Pendulum Press's condensed comic book adaptation to emphasize plot. In this case, because while it does not have every plot point and character from the novel, everything you see in the comic book is in the novel. And I'm also using some outside imagery to fill in its gaps. Jonathan Harker travels to Transylvania to close a real estate deal on Carfax Abbey with Count Dracula against the warnings from the locals. He's brought to the halfway point to the castle to be picked up by a coach driven by a mysterious coachman. He's greeted at the entrance by Count Dracula himself, mysterious in so many ways, yet cordial in welcoming him inside. He soon starts seeing Dracula's oddities, his lack of reflection in the mirror, his climbing down his castle walls. Then over time, Jonathan's discomfort turns into horror when Dracula's vampire wives seductively approach him with ill will, only to be stopped by Dracula, who promises them that he is all theirs once he's done with them. When Jonathan has had it, he makes that high-risk climb himself to begin his big escape, and along the way he discovers Dracula resting in his coffin and grabs a shovel but can do no injury to him with it. Jonathan's completed escape is off camera, and all the while in England, sisters, not besties like in the novel, Mina and Lucy are both looking forward to wedded bliss. Mina awaits Jonathan's return from Transylvania, unaware of the horrors he has been experiencing, while Lucy, instead of in the novel choosing Englishman Arthur Holmwood over competing suitors English Dr. Jack Seward and Quincy Morris from Texas, she chooses a character emerged from the novel, Quincy Holmwood from Texas, over Dr. Seward. The vessel, the Demeter, arrives at the English port, Whitby. The entire crew mysteriously offed, and a mysterious wolf jumps out. At this time, Renfield, a longtime patient in Dr. Seward's sanatorium, clairvoyantly senses this arrival of Dracula, not knowing that Dracula's intention is to play him until his usefulness has reached its end. Dracula's next move is on his first bike victim, Lucy. Her sudden and mysterious resulting symptoms prompt Dr. Seward to contact Dr. Abraham Van Helsing, who fortifies Lucy with a garlic wreath around her neck. And as they leave, Dr. Seward decides that it's best that they don't let Lucy's mother be anxious over her condition and keep her in the dark about it. But when Lucy's mother enters her room while she's sleeping, she removes the garlic wreath, thus removing what blocked Dracula from entering the room, and he breaks through the window in the form of a wolf. It scares the mother to a lifeless state and gives free rein for Dracula to finish his work on Lucy. So she passes away and becomes a full-fledged vampire. After her burial, Van Helsing, with the help of Seward and Holmwood, enters her crypt to drive a stake through her heart and all the other gory stuff so her soul should be made free. Amid all this tragedy, Mina brings Jonathan home from Transylvania, and it's established that they got married somewhere along the way. It's shortly after their arrival that Jonathan spots a familiar face. Van Helsing takes heavier measures to stop Dracula once and for all, but not before Mina is bitten as well. She then meets with Renfield in hopes that he will have the needed insight to escape the fate that she fears lies ahead, to which Renfield voices his hopes that their paths will never cross again. Dracula sees that as too much of a warning to his intended prey, confronts Renfield, and leaves him mortally wounded, whereupon he manages to live just long enough to tell Dr. Seward that Dracula has targeted Mina. By the time Van Helsing and all other men assisting him have rendered all of Dracula's coffins but one unusable for him by lacing the soil in them with bits of Holy Communion wafers, Dracula has taken that final step of having Mina drink his blood, putting her under his power. Though he fails to bring her with him, Dracula escapes to Transylvania with his last remaining undisturbed coffin containing the Transylvanian soil as needed to rejuvenate his powers resting therein. Van Helsing, Harker, Seward, Holmwood, and Mina all arrive in Transylvania in the pursuit of Dracula, though Mina is having episodes of being in an hypnotic daze under his influence. So much so that Dracula's vampire wives approach Van Helsing and Mina in their efforts to draw Mina into their sisterhood, and she's showing signs of feeling enticed at the offer. So Van Helsing encircles the tree they're sitting under with more pieces of communion wafers to repel them. The next day, they find themselves in battle with Transylvanian locals in league with Dracula in hopes to take possession of the coffin. Holmwood is off in the process, albeit going down, taking several down with him. Van Helsing stakes the vampire wives before finally Mina is cured of her vampirism and all loose ends are tied up from there. Okay, let's cover the not yet mentioned differences between the movie and the Bram Stoker novel. The one thing that keeps this from being a perfect adaptation, in my own opinion, is Dracula's gradual aging seeming to come from his increasing number of victims. I'd say the movie that plays that out best is in Christopher Lee and is unconnected to his previous Dracula movies, Count Dracula. You can go ahead and say that Gary Oldman in Francis Ford Coppola's Bram Stoker's Dracula holds that title. Too stylized for my taste. But French actor Louis Jourdan playing the part goes a long way. I liked him as the murderer in the episode of Columbo, as Arcane in The Swamp Thing, and as Bond villain Kamal Khan in Octopussy. And I've yet to watch him in one of his movies playing the dapper French ladies' man in the 50s and 60s. He once even played the Count of Monte Cristo. But he was the perfect Dracula, both when he had to be the gentlemanly count and when he had to be the menacing vampire. Judy Bowker, when I first saw her, I immediately connected to Clash of the Titans, playing Princess Andromeda. Here she played wonderfully as the love of Jonathan Harker's life, then made that sudden transition to one who's teetering between that and being Dracula's next catch. Susan Ben Halligan as Lucy, not necessarily more talented than Judy Bowker, but had a much richer dichotomy between being playful to being in complete feral rage. Richard Barnes is worth mentioning as Quincy Holmwood, British-born singer as well as actor playing a Texan. His accent wasn't spot on, but to be honest, he did better than I could do on that. Jack Shepherd as Renfield is not Dwight Frye, but does more to straddle between being a mentally disturbed man wrestling his inner demons and Dracula's doomed minion. Frank Finlay, if you're watching last year's review of A Christmas Carol adaptations, you saw me gush over his performance as Jacob Marley to George C. Scott Scrooge. He was just as good here playing Van Helsing, perfectly played him on all fronts, the observant and concerned physician, the practical scientist, and the strategic vampire fighter. This was 1977, so you know not to expect CGI. I think the filmmakers make great use of negative imagery to amp up the dark theme and overall practical effects. It gets very dark at times, most notably in the scene where Dracula stops his wives from moving in on Harker. As does happen in the novel at that point, he gives them a newborn baby to feast on. Thankfully, it draws the line at implications. But for me, it's a very faithful adaptation that doesn't do it in a paint-by-numbers fashion with much dramatic flair. But that's my take on BBC's Count Dracula. Agree, disagree, something I left out? Please let me know in the comment section. As always, I'll always do my shameless plug, the Sledge Miniseries. It's down in the description below, the link. Available in both digital and paper format. I am redoing the Kickstarter for part 4, and we're more than halfway along the way. But I'll always say it, let's all look for civility amid all any social or political strife. Let's not hate. Let's consider anybody we meet for the first time a potential friend. Everyone be safe, and God bless.